There are moments in life when strength doesn't disappear loudly. It fades quietly, in unfinished mornings, in tools left untouched, in dreams that stop asking to be fulfilled. Most people think perseverance looks like fire and noise, but real perseverance is quieter than that. It survives in routine. It hides in silence. It waits. This story will show you why discipline is not about forcing yourself forward, but about staying when every part of you wants to quit. In a small town shaped by smoke and iron, there lived a man named Rowan Hale. He was not famous, he was not extraordinary, but inside him burned something unseen, a hidden fire that refused to die, even when everything else fell apart. This is not a story about winning. It is a story about staying. The forge sat at the edge of town where the road stopped pretending it knew where it was going. Every morning before the sun decided whether it would rise with confidence or hesitation, Rowan Hale unlocked the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The air always smelled the same: iron, soot, and yesterday's work. Some people found that smell suffocating. To Rowan, it was grounding. It reminded him that things could still be shaped with effort, that heat still obeyed intention. He lit the fire the same way every day. No rush, no shortcuts. Discipline, he believed, was not about intensity. It was about showing up even when nothing changed. Rowan had built his life on repetition. Hammer strikes measured and calm, metal heated, cooled, reheated. Mistakes corrected, not with frustration, but with patience. In the forge, nothing demanded emotion, only attention, and that was why he liked it. Outside the forge, the town moved on without ceremony. People passed by, nodded, sometimes stopped to watch sparks rise like brief stars. They respected Rowan, though few truly knew him. He was reliable, steady, the kind of man you trusted with important things, because he never wavered. But respect is not the same as connection. Rowan rarely spoke unless necessary. Not because he was cold, but because words felt inefficient. The forge taught him that action mattered more than explanation. If something was broken, you fixed it. If it failed, you tried again. Simple. Or so he thought. At night, when the fire was out and the tools were cleaned and placed exactly where they belonged, Rowan sat alone on the wooden bench outside the forge. The quiet wrapped around him like a familiar coat. Some nights that quiet felt peaceful. Other nights, it felt heavy. He would stare at his hands, scarred, strong, reliable, and wonder why they felt so empty once the work was done. He had discipline. He had strength. He had endured more than most. Yet something inside him remained untouched. Rowan believed wanting the more was dangerous. Desire led to disappointment. Hope made people careless. So he trained himself not to expect anything beyond the next day's work. If he stayed disciplined enough, focused enough, everything else would take care of itself. That was the belief system he lived by, and for a long time it worked. The forge burned. Orders came in. Days passed in neat, predictable lines. Rowan mistook stability for fulfillment and endurance for purpose. He did not notice that his discipline had slowly become a wall, protecting him, yes, but also keeping life out. In the quiet glow of the forge, Rowan stood strong. But strength without warmth, like iron without fire, can only last so long. And though he didn't know it yet, the fire he relied on was about to be tested, not by effort, but by loss. 3-line summary. Rowan's disciplined life is introduced through the forge and his routines. His strength is real, but emotionally restrained and isolated. The foundation is solid, yet quietly incomplete. Morning after morning, the forge woke before the town. Rowan Hale believed this mattered, not because anyone was watching, but because consistency to him was a form of respect. Respect for the craft, respect for the fire, respect for himself. He worked while the streets were empty, while windows still slept behind curtains. The early hours belonged to him alone. No interruptions, no expectations, just the steady rhythm of effort. Hammer, turn, heat, quench, repeat. Discipline was never something Rowan announced. It lived in the small choices, sharpening tools after exhaustion, fixing what others would ignore, refusing to rush even when orders piled up. His work carried a quiet signature, not perfection, but care. And people noticed. Farmers trusted his tools. Travelers asked for repairs before long journeys. Even those who barely spoke to him knew one thing: if Rowan made it, it would last. The forge became a place of reliability in a world that often felt uncertain. These small victories fed something inside him. Not pride, but validation. Each completed blade, each horseshoe fitted just right, felt like proof that his way of living worked. That discipline was enough. That if you endured long enough, meaning would eventually catch up. Rowan rarely allowed himself rest. When fatigue arrived, he treated it like a weakness to be trained away. When loneliness surfaced, he buried it under routine. His answer to every discomfort was the same: keep going. And so he did. Days became months. Months became years. The forge remained steady, and so did he. From the outside, Rowan looked like a man who had figured life out. Calm, focused, unshakable. But discipline has a shadow. When routine replaces reflection, it can numb rather than strengthen. Rowan never asked why he worked so hard, only how to do it better. He did not notice how rarely he laughed, how rarely he allowed himself to want. Success in his mind meant not breaking. So when things went well, he doubled down. When they went wrong, he blamed himself for not being disciplined enough. The flaw was subtle, dangerous precisely because it felt virtuous. Rowan tied his worth to endurance. If he could keep going, he was valuable. If he ever stopped, he feared he would become nothing. Late one evening, after finishing an unusually long day, Rowan stood alone in the forge, watching the fire settle into embers. His body was exhausted, but his mind refused rest. There was always more to improve, more to prove. He didn't realize it then, but his discipline had quietly turned into armor, heavy, unyielding, and impossible to remove without pain. And armor, no matter how strong, cannot protect you from what comes from within. Three-line summary. Rowan's disciplined routine brings respect, stability, and small victories. He equates endurance with worth and avoids reflection. The flaw deepens. Discipline becomes identity, not a tool. The fire went out on a day that began like any other. Rowan Hale arrived before dawn, unlocked the door, and prepared the forge with practiced hands. But something felt off. Not wrong enough to stop him, just unfamiliar enough to linger. The flame caught slower than usual. The heat took longer to rise. Rowan ignored it. Discipline had taught him not to listen to discomfort. He worked through the morning, hammering iron that refused to cooperate, forcing rhythm where patience was required. By midday, the sky darkened unexpectedly. A storm rolled in without warning, violent, fast, and loud. Then it happened. A sharp crack echoed through the forge. Not metal. Structure. The old support beam above the fire, weakened by years of heat and neglect, gave way. Sparks exploded outward. Smoke swallowed the room. Rowan barely escaped. When the chaos settled, the forge stood damaged and silent. The beam had collapsed into the heart of the fire pit, crushing the core of his workspace. Rain poured through the broken roof, turning ash into mud. The forge was closed. Indefinitely. Rowan stood in the doorway, soaked and stunned, staring at what had once defined him. His tools lay scattered, his routine shattered. There was no checklist for this, no immediate fix. For the first time in years, there was nothing to do. The town offered sympathy, help, even rest. Rowan declined all of it. He told himself it was temporary, that he would rebuild quickly, that discipline would carry him through as it always had. But days passed, then weeks. Repairs cost more than he expected. The silence stretched longer than he could tolerate. Without the forge, Rowan felt weightless, and not in a good way. His mornings had no anchor. His hands twitched for purpose. His mind replayed the moment of collapse again and again, searching for where he failed. He blamed himself for missing the signs, for not working harder, for not being disciplined enough. Failure, when it finally arrived, didn't announce itself as defeat. It arrived as stillness. Rowan realized something terrifying. Without his routine, he did not know who he was. The discipline he relied on had no place to stand anymore. And without it, the hidden emptiness he'd avoided began to surface. The fire didn't just break in the forge, it broke inside him. 3-line summary. An unexpected collapse destroys Rowan's forge and routine. His identity, tied to discipline, is suddenly stripped away. Failure arrives as silence and exposes inner emptiness. Rowan Hale woke each morning out of habit, not purpose. His body still followed the old schedule, rising before the sun, sitting at the edge of the bed, waiting for the weight of the day to settle on his shoulders. But the weight never came. Instead, there was a strange lightness, the kind that feels like standing on unstable ground. He walked to the forge every day, even after the town advised him not to. The door remained unlocked now. The space inside smelled different, damp, cold, abandoned. Ash clung to the floor like memory that refused to fade. Rowan cleaned obsessively. He swept the same corner again and again, reorganized tools that could not yet be used, measured beams he couldn't afford to replace. His hands moved, but nothing progressed. Discipline, once alive, had become ritual without meaning. He told himself he was preparing. In truth, he was avoiding. Accepting the collapse meant accepting that his strength had limits, that discipline alone could fail, and that idea terrified him more than the loss itself. At night, Rowan replayed the past. Every hammer strike, every ignored creak, every moment he chose endurance over attention. Guilt wrapped around him quietly, convincing him that if he suffered enough, redemption would come. So he punished himself with routine. No rest, no conversation, no softness. The town slowly stopped checking in. Not out of cruelty, but because Rowan never let them stay long enough to help. He answered kindness with silence, concern with distance. He believed healing had to be earned through suffering. But suffering without reflection only deepens the wound. The forge became a shrine to what was lost. Rowan stood inside it for hours, staring at the broken beam as if it might speak. As if the past might return if he just stayed disciplined enough. Letting go felt like betrayal. Rest felt like weakness. Moving forward felt impossible. Rowan was holding ashes, convinced they could still burn. Three-line summary. Rowan clings to routine as denial, avoiding acceptance. Guilt and obsession replace purposeful discipline. Healing is delayed by refusal to let go. Silence has a sound when it stays too long. Rowan Hale discovered this during the hours when the town slept and his thoughts refused to. Without the forge's fire, nights stretched wider, emptier. The familiar crackle that once filled the dark was gone, replaced by a low, constant hum inside his chest. Not pain, not fear, but absence. He stopped visiting the forge every day, not because he had accepted the loss, but because even denial requires energy. And his was fading. The door remained open, the broken beam untouched. Dust settled where his hands once worked tirelessly. The place that gave him identity now reflected it back to him, hollow. Rowan withdrew. Meals became irregular. Conversations became brief nods. He walked the same roads but felt like a ghost moving through a life that no longer recognized him. Discipline, once his anchor, had nothing left to attach itself to. This was the dangerous part. The part no one warns you about. Not the collapse, but what follows when effort no longer produces meaning. Rowan sat alone one evening, staring at his hands again. They were still strong, still capable, yet they felt useless. Strength without direction becomes weight, and he carried it everywhere. For the first time, he allowed himself to ask the question he had avoided for years. If I stop enduring, what remains of me? The answer did not come. And in that unanswered space, quiet, heavy, undeniable, Rowan reached the lowest point of his journey. Not because he was broken beyond repair, but because he finally stood still long to hear the emptiness. This was the moment before change became possible. Three-line summary. Isolation deepens as Rowan withdraws completely. Strength remains, but without purpose, yes, it becomes burden. Silence creates space for the first honest question. Rowan Hale did not expect wisdom to arrive quietly. It came on a slow afternoon when the town felt suspended between movement and rest. Rowan sat on the bench outside the forge, not working, not avoiding, just existing. For the first time in weeks, he was not trying to fix anything. A boy passed by, no older than 10, dragging a stick along the dirt road. He stopped near the forge, staring at the broken beam inside with open curiosity. "Did it fall?" the boy asked. Rowan nodded. "Why don't you fix it?" The question was simple, not accusatory, not careless, just honest. Rowan opened his mouth to answer, about money, timing, plans, but stopped. None of the explanations felt true enough. Instead, he said, "I don't know how to start." The boy considered this, then looked at the scattered tools. "You don't fix everything at once," he said. "My father says you fix the part you can reach." Then he walked away. The word stayed. Rowan felt something loosen inside him, not relief, but recognition. Discipline had taught him to endure, not to adapt. He had been waiting for the strength to return, when what he needed was permission to begin imperfectly. That evening, Rowan returned to the forge and moved one tool. Just one. He placed it where it belonged. The fire did not return that night, but something else did. Understanding. Three-line summary. A simple encounter delivers unexpected wisdom. Rowan realizes discipline must include acceptance. Change begins with a small, reachable step. Rowan Hale began again without announcing it to anyone. There was no declaration, no moment of dramatic resolve. Just a quiet decision made early one morning while the air was still cool and the town still asleep. He returned to the forge not as a master trying to reclaim control, but as a man learning how to care. He started small. He cleared one corner completely. Not because it was efficient, but because it was reachable. He fixed a loose shelf instead of staring at the broken beam. He cleaned tools slowly, without urgency, without punishment. For the first time, discipline felt different. It no longer demanded suffering as proof. It no longer whispered that rest was weakness. Rowan allowed pauses. When fatigue came, he stopped. When frustration rose, he stepped outside and breathed. These moments felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous, as if softness might undo him. But it didn't. It steadied him. Healing did not arrive as confidence. It arrived as patience, as acceptance that some days would end unfinished and that this did not erase his worth. Rowan learned that discipline could be an act of kindness, that staying present mattered more than pushing through, that endurance without reflection had once protected him, but now it needed to evolve. Slowly, the forge began to resemble a workspace again, not a memorial. The broken beams still waited, but it no longer defined him. 3-line summary. Rowan begins healing through small, compassionate actions. Discipline transforms into care rather than punishment. Softness strengthens rather than weakens him. Progress never moves in a straight line. Rowan Hale learned this the hard way, on a morning when doubt returned without warning. The forge was cleaner now, more functional, almost hopeful, and that was when the old voice came back. You're moving too slowly. You should be further by now. Real strength doesn't hesitate. Rowan felt the familiar pressure tighten in his chest, the urge to push harder, skip rest, prove something. Discipline, in its old form, knocked at the door, wearing the mask of motivation. That day, exhaustion caught him off guard. His hands shook. A tool slipped, not dangerously, but enough to remind him of his limits. Frustration surged, sharp and tempting. This was the test. Not whether he could endure pain, but whether he could respect it. Rowan stopped. He sat down. He let the moment pass without turning it into failure. This choice felt harder than any long day he'd survived before. Consistency, he realized, wasn't about intensity. It was about returning, again and again, without self-betrayal. The old fire still burned inside him, but now he controlled its heat. 3-line summary. Old habits resurface, tempting Rowan to overpush. True strength is tested through restraint and consistency. Transformation proves real through conscious choice. The fire returned quietly, not in a blaze, not in celebration, just a steady warmth that filled the forge one morning as Rowan Hale struck the flint and watched the flame hold. He didn't smile. He didn't pause to admire it. He simply nodded, the way you do when something feels right. Not surprising. The forge was not the same as it had been before. Some marks of damage remained. The beam had been replaced with a simpler one, rougher than the original. The walls carried stains that would never fully disappear, but the space breathed again. So did Rowan. He worked differently now. He listened to the metal instead of forcing it. He stopped when his body asked him to. Some days he left early. Other days he stayed longer. not out of obligation, but choice. Purpose no longer came from endurance alone. It came from alignment. Rowan began to speak more. Not much, but enough. He accepted help when it was offered. He thanked people without feeling indebted. He allowed connection without fear that it would weaken him. And something surprising happened. The forge became warmer, not just with fire, but with presence. People lingered. Conversations lasted longer. Work felt lighter, even when it was hard. Rowan understood now. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about rebuilding without hardening. He had not returned to who he was. He had become someone truer. 3-line summary. The forge and Rowan are restored. Imperfect, but alive. Strength is redefined as balance, presence, and choice. Purpose emerges through alignment, not endurance. If you listen closely to this story, you'll notice something important. Rowan Hale did not change when the fire returned. He changed when he stopped punishing himself for needing it. For a long time, he believed discipline meant never stopping. That strength meant carrying everything alone. That worth had to be proven through endurance. And maybe you've believed that too. Quietly, without realizing it. But discipline is not about suffering in silence. It's about choosing what deserves your energy, again and again. Failure does not mean you lacked strength. Sometimes it means you carried too much for too long. Letting go is not weakness. It is the courage to release what no longer serves the journey. Healing begins when you allow yourself to move forward without erasing the past. When you accept help without shame. When you stop demanding perfection and start honoring consistency. Rebirth is not dramatic. It is quiet. It happens the moment you decide to stay without becoming rigid. And peace does not arrive when everything is fixed. It arrives when you are no longer at war with yourself. So if you are standing in the ashes of something that once defined you, hear this. You are not finished. Your strength is still there. It's simply learning a new shape. Stay patient with your process. Stay disciplined, but stay human. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to like it, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more quiet stories about strength, healing, and becoming whole again. Your fire is still alive.